3 weeks before her promotion celebration in Philadelphia, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. It wasn't dramatic. No lipstick on a collar. No mysterious late-night whisper in the hallway. No stranger's number saved under a fake name. It was quieter than that. Megan had left her laptop open on the kitchen island while she showered. The house was still dark outside, early morning light just barely bleeding through the blinds. I wasn't snooping. I was pouring coffee, half asleep, thinking about a client call I had at 9. Then her screen lit up. Preview notification. From Derek M. Subject. Last night. Still thinking about the waterfront hotel. Thank you for everything. I didn't breathe for a second. Waterfront hotel. The words didn't register at first. They just sat there, glowing softly against the gray background of her inbox. My brain tried to smooth it over immediately. Corporate retreat. Client event. Team booking. But the phrase, thank you for everything, didn't feel corporate. It felt *mate. I stood there longer than I should have, mug hovering under the coffee machine, listening to the faint sound of water running upstairs. I told myself I should look away. I told myself it wasn't my business. But it was my wife. I pulled my phone out and took a picture of the screen before it dimmed. When she came downstairs 10 minutes later, hair damp, wrapped in a towel, humming like it was just another Tuesday, I was still standing there. Not because I wanted to confront her, but because my body didn't know how to move. She stopped when she saw my face. "What?" she asked lightly. I held up my phone. "Who's Derek thanking you for last night at a waterfront hotel?" For half a second, and I swear it was only half a second, something changed in her eyes. A flicker, like a calculation running behind the scenes. Then she laughed. Not nervous. Not guilty. Amused. "Oh my God, Ryan. Are you serious right now?" I showed her the *T. She didn't even take the phone from me. Didn't read it. Didn't lean closer. Instead, she crossed her arms. "Did you seriously go through my computer?" "It popped up," I said. "I was making coffee. And you decided to photograph it?" Her eyebrows lifted. "That's wow." "What's wow is the part about the hotel," I said. She rolled her eyes and walked past me to grab a glass from the cabinet. Completely calm. "It's corporate humor," she said, filling it with water. "We were near the waterfront for a client event. Marketing people exaggerate. You know that." "I don't know that," I replied. "I don't know why someone would thank my wife for everything." She turned to face me then. "And I don't know why my husband is acting like a detective over an email preview." There it was. The pivot. Suddenly we weren't talking about Derek, or hotels, or last night. We were talking about me. "You've been tense lately," she continued, softer now. "You're stressed. I get it. But this? *ting my emails? That's not healthy." "I wasn't. Ryan," she cut in gently, stepping closer, lowering her voice like she was calming a child. "Do you trust me?" The question felt like a trap. "Yes," I said. Because what else was I supposed to say? "Then why are we even having this conversation?" "Because the email exists," I wanted to say. "Because hotels aren't jokes." Because something about the tone felt wrong. But instead I hesitated. She sighed slow, disappointed. "It's exhausting," she said. "Feeling like I have to defend every interaction at work. Derek sends dramatic emails to everyone. That's his personality. If I showed you his messages to the rest of the team, you'd see." She never offered to show me. She just said she could. And somehow that was enough to make me second-guess myself. "You're twisting this," I said quietly. "No," she replied. "You are." The confidence in her voice was what shook me most. There was no scrambling, no over-explaining, no emotional meltdown, just calm redirection. "You think I'd risk everything 3 weeks before my biggest promotion?" she asked. "For some hotel fling?" When she framed it like that, it sounded ridiculous. She stepped around me again, this time brushing my arm lightly. "I love you," she said, almost absent-mindedly. "But you have to stop looking for problems where there aren't any. Looking for problems. as if I'd gone hunting for betrayal instead of it flashing across a screen in my own kitchen. For a brief, disorienting moment, I actually questioned myself. Maybe I was projecting. Maybe I was insecure about her promotion. Maybe I felt left behind. She had been climbing fast. Bigger accounts. More travel. More executive dinners. More rooms I wasn't in. Maybe this was about me feeling small. That thought stuck harder than the email. Because if that was true, then I was the one poisoning something good. I didn't mean to accuse you, I said finally. She softened immediately. Reward for surrender. I know, she said. You just overthink. Overthink. The word felt smaller than paranoid. Kinder. Manageable. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her bag, and said she'd be late because she had to finalize something for the Philadelphia dinner. And just like that, it was over. Except it wasn't. Because long after she left, I stood in the kitchen replaying the conversation in my head. She never explained why he said, "Thank you for everything." She never clarified what last night referred to. She never mentioned which colleagues were there. She just reframed the situation until I became the issue. That was the part that lingered. Not the hotel. Not Derek. The shift. The way the focus moved off her actions and onto my reaction. Later that afternoon, I tried to shake it off. I told myself successful people have complicated schedules. I told myself marketing teams are weird. I told myself insecurity ruins marriages. But that night, when she came home, her phone was face down on the counter. It hadn't been before. And when it buzzed, she flipped it over before I could see the screen. "Work," she said quickly, without me asking. I hadn't even spoken. That was when the quiet unease settled in. Not loud enough to accuse. Not strong enough to confront again. Just a low hum in my chest. 3 weeks before her celebration in Philadelphia, I saw the first crack in something I thought was solid. And for a moment, a dangerous, confusing moment, she almost convinced me the crack was in me. Almost. After that morning, I told myself I'd let it go. That's what healthy husbands do, right? They don't spiral over vague emails. They don't interrogate every buzz of a phone. They trust. They breathe. They move on. But something in me didn't move on. It just got quieter. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I'm not proud of noticing. Not because they were tiny, but because I realized they weren't new. They'd been happening for months. I just hadn't connected them. Megan's Atlanta trips had doubled this year. First, I'd been proud. Expansion accounts. Regional growth. She was becoming indispensable. But when I checked our shared calendar, the frequency was strange. 2 trips in March. 3 in April. None of them aligned with the major conferences her company usually attended. When I casually asked about one of them over dinner, she didn't miss a beat. Market research, she said. Pre-acquisition positioning. It sounded impressive. It also sounded rehearsed. Then there were the hotel charges. We share a primary credit card for household expenses. I handle most of the finances because I run my own consulting firm and numbers are kind of my thing. Normally I don't scrutinize every line. But once that email lodged itself in my brain, I couldn't not look. Boutique hotels in Atlanta. Not conference centers. Not the standard business chains her company partners with. Smaller places. Waterfront views. Rooftop bars. When I asked why she wasn't staying at the corporate hotel blocks anymore, she shrugged. More flexible booking, she said. And honestly, I deserve something nicer once in a while. That part hit me, because she did deserve nice things. She worked hard. She was sharp, ambitious, magnetic in rooms I'd never even be invited into. So again I swallowed it. Then I noticed the dresses. New ones. Elegant, fitted. A little bolder than her usual work attire. Deep navy silk. Emerald green satin. A red one that made her look like she belonged on a magazine cover. "You didn't wear that to the Henderson dinner," I said one night, recognizing the red one still hanging with the tags tucked inside. She paused. "Oh, that one?" I ended up changing. Felt like too much. But I'd seen the photos from the Henderson dinner on LinkedIn. Group SH*TS. Table pictures. She'd worn black. That red dress had never appeared anywhere public. I started remembering other small moments. Her phone face down, always face down now. A new password on it. Not the one we'd used for years. When I asked about it lightly, she laughed. Company security policy update, she said. IT required new passcodes. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. Then there was the irritation. Not explosive. Not obvious. Just thin patience. If I asked about weekend plans, she'd answer, but clipped. If I suggested we drive out to the lake like we used to, she'd say she was too tired. If I mentioned we hadn't taken a real vacation together in almost a year, she'd say we were both busy. And she wasn't wrong. We were busy. But busy doesn't erase something. It just hides it. One night, while she was packing for another Atlanta trip, I saw a transfer notification on her tablet for $1,000, sent from our joint account. The description read, Project Blue. I stared at it longer than I should have. What's Project Blue? I asked casually from the doorway. She zipped her suitcase without looking up. Investment thing, she said. Short-term positioning strategy. Derek looped me in. Derek. There he was again. Through the company? I asked. No, just separate opportunity. Smart, Ryan. Trust me. That phrase again. Trust me. The first transfer had been 3 months ago. Then another. Then another. 4,000 to 5,000 each time. At the time, I'd assumed it was something professional. A side investment. A tax strategy. Now, with everything else stacked in my head, it looked different. It looked like liquidity. Like someone preparing for movement. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started mentally replaying the last 8 months. There were gaps. Weekends she'd said she was visiting her mother in the suburbs. But when I casually asked her mom about one of them weeks later, she'd said, Oh, I haven't seen Megan in a bit. She's been so busy. I brushed it off then. Now it tightened my chest. There were corporate dinners with no photos. No tagged colleagues. No follow-up stories. There were evenings she'd come home glowing. Not guilty, not distant. Just energized. Like she'd been somewhere she felt fully seen. And maybe that was the part that hurt most. Because I used to be the place she felt seen. One Thursday night, about 2 weeks before the Philadelphia celebration, she snapped at me for asking what time she'd be home. Why does it matter? She said sharply. Because I'm cooking, I replied. I don't need a curfew, Ryan. I wasn't giving you one. Then stop acting like I owe you a minute-by-minute breakdown. I stood there stunned. It wasn't about the time. It was about accountability. And she didn't want it. Later that night, while she slept, I lay awake next to her listening to her breathing and feeling like I was in bed with a stranger. I started to see the pattern. The increased travel. The boutique hotels. The unphotographed dresses. The defensive shifts. The unexplained transfers. The new password. The face-down phone. Individually, they were explainable. Together, they formed something else. Something structured. Something intentional. I wasn't dealing with random flirtation. I was looking at preparation. And that's when a colder thought entered my mind. What if the email wasn't the beginning? What if it was just the first slip? What if she hadn't been reckless? Just confident I wouldn't look. That possibility scared me more than the idea of an affair. Because affairs are messy. This felt organized. Like steps. Like a blueprint. The promotion dinner in Philadelphia was coming up fast. She talked about it constantly. The venue. The guest list. The executives flying in. She's going to use that night to level up. One of her coworkers had said to me at a barbecue, Big moves coming. Big moves. I started wondering if I was part of the future she was leveling up into. Or if I was part of the past she was financially preparing to exit. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just watched. And the more I watched, the clearer the pattern became. 3 weeks ago it was one email. Now it was a chain. And chains don't form by accident. They're built. Link by link. And I was starting to understand that whatever Megan was doing, it wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. I didn't confront her. Not because I was afraid of the answer, but because I already felt it settling into place, piece by piece, like glass forming a mirror I wasn't ready to look into. If this was what I thought it was, I needed more than suspicion. I needed certainty. So I did something I never thought I would do. I stopped reacting and started documenting. Through a former client of mine, an auditor who specialized in forensic accounting, I requested a detailed review of our joint financial activity over the past 8 months. I framed it as a portfolio health check. Technically, that wasn't a lie. I just didn't mention what I suspected I'd find. When the first compiled report came back, my hands were steady. My chest wasn't. The pattern was precise. Money from our joint account had been transferred in consistent increments, 4,000 here, 5,000 there, into an external account that wasn't tied to any institution I recognized. Project Blue wasn't an investment fund. It was a private holding account. Not corporate. Not business-backed. Personal. From that account, payments had gone out to a short-term luxury apartment in Atlanta. Not a hotel. An apartment. 3 separate months. The leaseholder's name wasn't Megan's. It was Derek's. I sat at my desk staring at the line item for a long time. There were business-class flight upgrades on weekends that weren't listed as company travel. There were high-end restaurant charges that didn't match her supposed conference schedules. And then there was the watch. $23,000. Purchased at a boutique jeweler. Registered in Derek's name. I had to reread that entry 3 times. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't flirting. It wasn't corporate humor. It was infrastructure. A double life with logistics. I didn't explode. I didn't even cry. What surprised me most was the clarity. The noise in my head, the doubt she'd planted, the insecurity she'd redirected, went silent. Facts don't argue. Facts don't deflect. Facts just sit there. I needed one more piece. So I reached out quietly to the hotel chain she'd claimed she stayed at during a weekend she told me she was visiting her mother. The boutique waterfront property in Atlanta. I didn't make accusations. I requested confirmation for billing reconciliation. 2 names appeared on the reservation. Megan and Derek. Check-in, Friday, 6:42 p.m. Check-out, Sunday, 11:08 a.m. That same weekend, she'd FaceTimed me from what she said was her mother's guest room. Plain white walls behind her. The waterfront hotel rooms were minimalist. Plain white walls. I closed my laptop, not because I couldn't handle more, but because I didn't need more. This wasn't impulsive betrayal. This was sustained, planned, funded. She hadn't just cheated. She had been preparing. Preparing financially. Preparing logistically. Preparing an exit. And I understood something then that made everything else make sense. The promotion dinner in Philadelphia wasn't just a celebration. It was a launch. She was stepping into a higher tier professionally. And I was about to become unnecessary. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I called my attorney. We had a prenuptial agreement. One we signed calmly years ago, over wine and jokes about being practical adults. It included an adultery clause. It included financial misconduct provisions. It included asset protection tied to joint misuse. At the time, it felt excessive. Now it felt surgical. Over the next 10 days, everything moved quietly. Evidence was cataloged. Transfer records were timestamped. Hotel confirmations were secured. The luxury apartment lease was documented. The watch receipt was traced. I filed motions to freeze our joint accounts pending review. I adjusted my business accounts separately. I prepared. Not out of vengeance, but out of precision. She was building a departure runway. I was reinforcing the foundation she'd tried to walk off of. During those 10 days, she acted completely normal. More affectionate, even. Talking about Philadelphia constantly. "I'm going to thank you in my toast," she said one night, smiling while adjusting her earrings in the mirror. "For being my steady anchor." Anchor. The word almost made me laugh. She was already untying herself from it. I watched her rehearse parts of her speech under her breath. She practiced sounding humble, sounding empowered, sounding independent. What she didn't know was that I had secured something else. Surveillance confirmation from the hotel lobby during that mother visit weekend. Time-stamped footage of them checking in together. No ambiguity. No interpretation required. Just reality. I didn't create a scene at home. I didn't slam doors. I didn't accuse her again. There was no hysteria. Because hysteria benefits the guilty. Calm benefits the prepared. The Philadelphia banquet was scheduled downtown. Black tie. Executive guest list. Department heads flying in. It would be her moment. Her spotlight. And she intended to use that stage to reshape her narrative. She'd already begged *N doing it privately. Small jokes about my predictable routines. Light comments about how she was outgrowing small-town comfort. Subtle reframes positioning herself as evolving beyond the boring marriage. She was testing the storyline. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't going to argue with it. I was going to let her tell it. And then I was going to finish it. On my terms. I didn't feel rage anymore. Rage is loud. What I felt was something colder. Measured. The kind of calm that comes when the illusion drops and all that's left is structure. She thought she was orchestrating her escape. But contracts don't dissolve because someone grows restless. They dissolve because someone violates them. And she had. Systematically. The night of her promotion in Philadelphia would not just mark her professional ascent. It would mark something else. Not revenge. Not humiliation. Closure. Under bright lights. With facts. And no room for deflection. The night of her promotion in Philadelphia arrived wrapped in cold December air and polished glass. Downtown was lit up. Hotels glowing gold against the river. Black cars lining the curb. Men in tailored tuxedos and women in gowns stepping onto red carpet runners like they were entering a premiere. Megan looked exactly like someone about to ascend. She wore the emerald dress this time. The one I'd never seen in photos. It fit like it had been designed for this exact room. Controlled elegance, quiet power. Her hair was swept back, diamond studs catching the chandelier light. "You look proud," she said as we stood near the entrance, waiting to be announced. "I am," I replied, and I meant it, just not for the reason she thought. The ballroom overlooked the waterfront. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A stage with a massive projection screen behind it. Her company logo looped in slow rotation. Executives from New York. Regional directors from Atlanta. Marketing heads, investors, board members. And Derek, standing near the bar in a navy suit, laughing with someone from finance. When our eyes met, he smiled politely, confident, like a man who thought the next chapter was already written. We took our seats near the front. Megan's name was printed in gold script on the program under Vice President of Strategic Growth. Vice President. She'd done it. The speeches began. Applause filled the room in measured waves. Colleagues praised her numbers, her leadership, her vision. Then it was her turn. She walked to the stage effortlessly, accepting the microphone like it belonged in her hand. "I'm incredibly honored tonight," she began, voice steady, practiced. She thanked her team, her mentors, the executives who believed in her trajectory. Then she turned toward our table. "And of course," she said, smiling lightly, "my husband Ryan, for being my anchor through all of this." Soft laughter from the crowd. She continued, "He's predictable," she added playfully. "Steady, grounded, the calm to my ambition." More laughter. "Sometimes I joke that I've outgrown our quiet little routines," she said, drawing another ripple of amusement. "But that's what growth is, right? Stepping beyond comfort." The words were subtle, carefully chosen, but they landed exactly the way she intended. Independent, evolving, beyond. I stood slowly when she finished, applauding with everyone else. She stepped down from the stage glowing, absorbing congratulations, hugs, flashes from phones. When the room began settling for dinner service, I approached the stage coordinator quietly. 5 minutes, I said. I walked up while the clinking of glasses faded. "Just briefly," I said into the microphone, calm, composed. "I'd like to add something." Megan's smile faltered. The screen behind me shifted. Not to the company logo. To financial statements. Clear. Time-stamped. Transfers labeled Project Blue. Luxury apartment lease agreements. Flight upgrades. The watch receipt. Derek's name unmistakable. The room didn't gasp. It went silent. I want to thank you all for celebrating Megan tonight, I continued evenly. Her promotion is well-earned. Her strategic planning is impressive. No raised voice. No anger. Just clarity. For 8 months, I said, funds from our joint account were systematically transferred into a private holding account used to finance an undisclosed apartment in Atlanta. Business-class flights. Jewelry purchases. All documented. I paused, allowing the evidence to sit. Tonight marks not only her professional promotion, I added, but the formal end of our marriage. Effective immediately. Megan stood frozen near the center aisle. Derek's face had drained of color. I clicked once more. Hotel surveillance still frame. Them. Checking in together. Time-stamped. Same weekend she'd claimed to visit her mother. This isn't rumor, I said quietly. It isn't speculation. It's documentation. The executives weren't whispering. They were staring. Because financial misconduct isn't scandal. It's liability. I stepped away from the podium without another word. No accusations. No theatrics. Just facts. As I walked past Megan, she whispered, "What are you doing?" "Closing a contract," I replied. I left before the room regained sound. Outside, the cold air felt sharp and clean. My phone buzzed within minutes. Then again. Then again. By morning, her corporate card had been suspended pending internal review. By afternoon, leadership had opened a compliance investigation regarding misuse of corporate travel funds. Derek's financial entanglements surfaced quickly. The apartment lease wasn't disclosed. The watch purchase had triggered internal audit flags. Part of the money Megan transferred had been used to cover his undisclosed debt obligations. Within 2 weeks, Derek lost his position. Formal inquiry pending. Megan was terminated shortly after for policy violations tied to financial misuse and failure to disclose personal conflicts impacting corporate resources. The divorce proceeded without resistance. The prenuptial agreement was airtight. Adultery clause triggered. Financial misconduct documented. She retained only the assets she'd entered the marriage with. The house remained mine. The investments remained mine. My professional reputation remained untouched. I relocated 3 months later to Charlotte, expanding my consulting firm into a larger regional market. The move wasn't about escape. It was about reset. Sometimes endings don't happen in screaming matches. Sometimes they happen under chandeliers, under bright lights, with slides. That night in Philadelphia, I didn't publicly destroy a family. I didn't shout. I didn't humiliate. I simply presented evidence. She had constructed a double life carefully, financially, logistically, strategically, and she miscalculated one thing. I wasn't predictable. I was prepared. And when contracts are violated, they don't collapse in chaos. They close with signatures. The morning after Philadelphia didn't feel dramatic. It felt administrative. Sunlight came through the hotel curtains in that flat, in different way it always does after a long night. My phone was face down on the nightstand, not out of secrecy, just because I didn't need to see what I already knew would be there. Missed calls. Messages. Damage control. I showered slowly, put on a clean shirt, checked out without making eye contact with the front desk. Outside, the city was moving like nothing had happened. That was the strange part. The most defining moment of my marriage had unfolded under chandeliers and projection screens, and the world kept ordering coffee and hailing rideshares like it was Tuesday. By the time I landed back home, my attorney had already sent confirmation. The account freeze motions were active. Corporate legal had acknowledged receipt of documentation. Megan had retained counsel. She hadn't texted me. Not once. Not "how could you?" Not "we need to talk." Nothing. Silence. And that silence told me more than anger would have. 2 days later, she came to the house. Not with rage. Not with theatrics. With a suitcase. I opened the door before she knocked twice. She looked smaller. Not physically, but diminished. Like someone who'd miscalculated the scale of a decision. "We need to discuss logistics," she said. "Not why. Not how could you. Logistics." "Of course," I replied, stepping aside. She walked through the foyer slowly, eyes scanning the space like it had already become foreign territory. "I spoke with my lawyer," she said. "You triggered the clause." "Yes." She nodded once. "I didn't think you'd actually use it. That's what contracts are for." She almost smiled at that. But it didn't land. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she asked, "Did you plan that entire thing?" "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "You could have handled it privately." "I could have," I agreed. "But you didn't." "No." The truth sat between us. She had intended to reposition herself publicly that night. Independent. Expanding beyond small comforts. Beyond predictable routines. I simply adjusted the narrative to include the full dataset. "I wasn't trying to humiliate you," I said calmly. Her jaw tightened slightly. It felt like humiliation. It was disclosure. There's a difference. She looked toward the kitchen island, the same place where that email had lit up weeks earlier. "When did you know?" she asked. "The morning of the email," I said. "I didn't know everything, but I knew something shifted." She didn't argue that. She didn't deny anything. That was over. "Derek didn't think you'd go that far," she said quietly. That was the first time his name had been spoken inside this house since Philadelphia. "He miscalculated too," I replied. Her shoulders lowered slightly. "He's under investigation," she said. "They're looking at everything." "I'm aware." "And you're fine with that?" I held her gaze. "I didn't create the transfers." Silence again. She moved toward the hallway. "I'll take my things," she said. "Upstairs." I could hear drawers opening, closet doors sliding, the mechanical sounds of disentanglement. No crying, no shouting, just extraction. When she came back down, she paused at the base of the stairs. "I didn't start it planning to leave you," she said. "I didn't interrupt. It was supposed to be temporary," she added. "Something separate from home. Temporary doesn't require an apartment lease. Temporary doesn't require asset transfers. Temporary doesn't require contingency planning." But I didn't say that. "I convinced myself I deserved more," she continued. "More excitement, more scale, more movement. And I didn't fit that picture anymore?" I asked. She hesitated. "You felt stable," she said. "Stable. Anchor. Predictable." Words that once sounded like praise. Now they sounded like dismissal. "I wasn't bored," she said quickly. "I was evolving." "Evolution doesn't require deception," I replied. That landed. She picked up her suitcase. "At some point," she said, "you stopped challenging me." That almost made me laugh. "I wasn't competing with you," I said evenly. "I was building with you." She didn't respond to that. At the door, she paused one last time. "You didn't destroy me," she said quietly. "You just exposed the version I didn't think anyone would see." That was the closest thing to honesty she'd offered. "I didn't expose anything that wasn't documented," I said. She nodded once. Then she left. The house didn't feel empty. Felt quiet. Different. Like a room after construction dust settles. Over the next few weeks, everything proceeded cleanly. No contested assets. No drawn-out negotiations. The prenuptial agreement did exactly what it was designed to do. Remove ambiguity. She retained what she'd entered with. I retained what we'd built under defined terms. Her termination became official 2 weeks later. Corporate policy violations. Undisclosed conflicts of interest. Misuse of funds. Derek's case unfolded separately. Debt entanglements. Internal review. Board scrutiny. I didn't follow it closely. I didn't need to. By spring, I relocated to Charlotte. New office. New contracts. Expanded client base. People asked why I moved. Opportunity, I'd say. And it wasn't a lie. But the deeper reason was simpler. When something breaks cleanly, you don't glue it back together. You repurpose the space. Some nights, I'd replay the ballroom in Philadelphia. Not with regret. Not with pride. Just analysis. There was no shouting. No chaos. No spectacle beyond the facts themselves. And that's what lingered. She hadn't lost because I was louder. She lost because she underestimated documentation. Underestimated contracts. Underestimated quiet preparation. Sometimes the end of a marriage doesn't explode. Sometimes it concludes. Signed. Filed. Closed. And what surprised me most wasn't the loss. It was the relief. Not relief that she was gone. Relief that clarity replaced confusion. Relief that doubt had been replaced with evidence. Relief that I hadn't become the jealous, paranoid man she tried to reframe me as. I wasn't controlling. I wasn't insecure. I was observant. And when observation turns into verification, you don't argue. You act. That night, under bright lights, I didn't ruin her future. I simply refused to finance it. And in the end, that's what mattered most. The fallout was swift. By morning, her corporate card was blocked and compliance launched a full audit. The apartment lease, the transfers, the watch, everything surfaced. Derek's undisclosed debts came to light, tied directly to funds Megan moved. He was suspended, then terminated. 2 weeks later, she was let go for policy violations. What they built in secret unraveled under review. Consequences don't shout, they accumulate. The divorce finalized quickly under the prenup. She kept what she brought in. I kept the house, investments, and stability she gambled. Months later, I relocated to Charlotte and expanded my firm. No spectacle, no revenge, just reset. That night in Philadelphia wasn't destruction. It was closure. Sometimes growth isn't about moving up with someone. It's about moving forward without them.